The wedding is off. I don't love you anymore. Zachary said it loud enough for the entire seafood deck to hear. The Saturday brunch crowd in La Jolla went completely silent. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes turning toward our table near the railing, the one he had specifically requested when we arrived. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I looked at him. Then at his friends, Nathan and Patrick, who were struggling to suppress their laughter at the next table. I set my mimosa down gently. "Thank you for being honest," I said, my voice steady. "And thank you for putting the non-refundable $15,000 catering deposit on your card last week." I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked away. Be honest, if someone tried to humiliate you in public like this, would you freeze up or fight back? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you would have poured your drink on him, or an ice cube if you would have walked away cold like Sophia. My heels struck the pavement of the parking lot with a rhythm that felt less like a retreat and more like a march. I unlocked my car door, slid behind the wheel, and waited for the crash. I waited for the tears, the hyperventilating, the crushing weight of rejection to collapse my lungs. But the crash never came. Instead, I sat in the silence of my sedan, watching a seagull pick at a discarded wrapper, and I felt a terrifying sense of clarity. I replayed the scene in the restaurant. I saw Zachary's face again. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't regret, it was anticipation. He had been waiting for me to shatter. He had brought an audience, because my pain was supposed to be his validation. In my line of work, you learn to spot structural weaknesses before the building goes up. But in relationships, sometimes, you don't see the blueprint until the demolition starts. I realized then that this wasn't just a breakup. It was a pattern I should have recognized years ago. Psychologists call it the discard phase. It is the final stage of the narcissistic cycle, where the abuser seeks to devalue the victim publicly, to validate their own superiority. He didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to destroy my credibility so that when he walked away, he would look like the survivor of a crazy woman, rather than the villain of the story. He wanted a scene. I gave him silence. I started the engine and pulled onto the highway, heading north. As the coastline blurred past my window, I began to review the ledger of the last 4 years. I didn't think about the romantic walks or the anniversaries. I thought about the balance sheet. I thought about the $85,000 wedding he insisted on, a white-gloved spectacle I never wanted. I wanted a small ceremony in a botanical garden. He wanted a ballroom at the Ritz because he needed to impress his investors. I thought about my career. I am a landscape architect. I design sustainable urban parks that breathe life into concrete jungles. But to Zachary, my work was just a cute hobby. He constantly introduced me at parties, as in design, letting people assume I picked out throw pillows rather than engineered drainage systems for city blocks. He needed a trophy, not a partner, so I had dimmed my light to fit into his shadow. I thought about the $8,000 I transferred to him last year to cover a banking error that turned out to be a gambling debt. I had paid it to save his image. Why did I stay? The question gnawed at me as I exited the freeway. Was I weak? Was I stupid? No. I was an economist of the heart, trapped by the sunk cost fallacy. It is the dangerous economic principle that convinces you to keep investing in a failing project simply because you have already paid so much into it. You tell yourself that if you just put in one more year, one more sacrifice, one more compromise, the investment will finally yield a return. You convince yourself that walking away means the last 4 years were a waste. But as I turned onto my street, the truth settled over me like a blueprint snapping into focus. The 4 years weren't an investment. They were a tax. A tax on my self-worth, my creativity, and my peace of mind. And today, the audit was finally over. I pulled into my parking spot and killed the engine. I looked up at the apartment balcony where we had shared drinks just last night, where he had kissed me and told me he loved me, knowing full well he had a reservation for 3 at the seafood deck the next morning. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt the cold, hard resolve of a project manager taking over a failing construction site. The foundation was rotten. The facade was crumbling. It was time to bulldoze the lot and build something new. My apartment should have been a sanctuary. Instead, it sounded like a war zone. My phone was vibrating against the granite kitchen island, a relentless, angry buzz that echoed off the walls. I looked at the screen. 17 missed calls. 42 text messages. The latest notification was a voicemail from Barbara, Zachary's mother. I didn't need to listen to it to know the tone. It wouldn't be a condolence, it would be a performance review. I pressed play, putting it on speaker so the venom could air out the room. Sophia, Zachary called me. I honestly cannot say I am surprised. I told him years ago that your lack of ambition would eventually become a liability. You pushed him to this. Now, do not make a scene. We have a reputation in this city, even if you do not. Fix this before the gala season starts. Click. I stared at the phone. For years, Barbara's passive-aggressive comments about my little gardening job had chipped away at my confidence. Now, the mask was off. This wasn't just a breakup, it was a coordinated family eviction. Then the texts from Zachary started rolling in, rapid fire. You're in shock. Pick up. Everyone is laughing at you, Sophia. Don't make it worse. Stop ignoring me. You're acting crazy. He was baiting me. He needed a reaction. He had $1,000 riding on my tears, and my silence was costing him money. He wanted me to scream, to beg, to send a wall of text defending myself so he could show it to Nathan and Patrick and say, "See? She's unstable." I reached for the phone, but I didn't type. I didn't block him. I didn't engage. I initiated the Grey Rock method. It is a psychological tactic used to disarm toxic personalities. You don't fight, you don't explain. You become as uninteresting and unresponsive as a smooth, gray stone. To a narcissist who feeds on emotional supply, indifference is not just a defense, it is kryptonite. By refusing to provide the fuel of anger or sadness, you starve them. I watched his little typing bubble appear and disappear, waiting for a fight I would never give him. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the contract for the La Jolla Cove Club. I scrolled past the floral arrangements and the menu options until I found the financial clause. Clause 4B. In the event of cancellation, the deposit of $15,000 is non-refundable. Zachary knew this. He was banking on it. He probably thought the lost money would be the final nail in my coffin, the thing that would break me financially while he walked away unscathed. But then I read the next line. However, said deposit is fully transferable to any event date within 12 months, provided the primary account holder authorizes the change. I looked at the signature line. It was my name. Zachary had used his credit card to flash his wealth, but he had put the contract in my name to avoid the administrative headache. I picked up my phone and dialed the venue coordinator. La Jolla Cove Club, Events Department. Hi, this is Sophia. I have a reservation for a wedding reception next month. Oh, Sophia. Yes, we're so excited. Did you need to adjust the guest count? Actually, I said, my voice calm, professional, the voice of a woman who builds skyscrapers, not one who crumbles. I need to make a slight pivot. The wedding is cancelled. There was a gasp on the other end. Oh my God, I am so sorry, we can. Don't be sorry, I interrupted. The deposit is transferable, correct? Well, yes. But, good. I don't want to cancel the date. I want to rebrand the event. Keep the champagne, keep the venue. But cancel the white roses. I'm going to need something much more structural. And send the updated invoice to me, not the groom. I hung up the phone. Zachary wanted a reaction. I was going to give him an event. Arrogance is a flaw in any design. It creates blind spots. It makes you assume the structure will hold simply because you built it. Zachary was arrogant. He had changed his Netflix password within 10 minutes of leaving the restaurant, a petty move designed to sting. But he hadn't changed the password to our shared cloud storage. He assumed I was too technologically illiterate, his words, not mine to navigate the back end of his digital life. He forgot that I use CAD software to model city blocks. Navigating a Dropbox folder is not exactly quantum physics. I opened my laptop and logged in. The screen glowed with the blue light of his secrets. I started with the folder labeled Wedding. I expected to find receipts, maybe a draft of his vows. Instead, I found a document titled Priority Notification List. It was a spreadsheet. Names, phone numbers, and a pre-written script. I've made the difficult decision to end the engagement. Sophia is struggling with some personal instability, and while I love her, I cannot anchor myself to someone who refuses to grow. I read it twice. The timestamp showed he had written it 3 weeks ago. While I was fitting him for his tuxedo, he was drafting my character assassination. It was a smear campaign disguised as a sympathy plea. But I didn't stop there. In architecture, if the facade is cracking, you check the foundation. I backed out of the wedding folder and clicked on finances. Zachary had always been secretive about money. I handle the macro, you handle the micro, he liked to say. I assumed that meant he handled investments, and I handled groceries. I found a subfolder named Z Tech Ventures. Inside was a PDF downloaded just last month. It was a loan application for a small business line of credit. The amount was $42,000. I scrolled down. The borrower wasn't Zachary. The borrower was Sophia Vance. He had used my social security number. He had used my credit score, which was a pristine 820 compared to his, which I suspected was dumpster fire level. He had digitally forged my signature on the promissory note. My heart didn't race. It slowed down. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. This was a felony. This was identity theft. I scrolled to the bottom of the document, looking for the cosigner or witness required for a loan of this size without collateral. There, in a looping, elegant digital script, was the witness signature, Barbara Sterling. His mother, the woman who had just left me a voicemail about my lack of ambition, had knowingly conspired with her son to defraud me of $42,000 to fund his failing tech startup. I sat back in my chair. The room was silent, but my mind was loud with the sound of pieces clicking into place. This wasn't a relationship. It was a heist. They hadn't kept me around for 4 years because they loved me. They kept me around because I was solvent. I was the host organism, and they were the parasites. I downloaded the file. Then I downloaded the metadata proving when it was created and by which user. I saved it all to an encrypted external drive. I looked at the narrow escape party invitation I had drafted on my screen. I had been worried it might be too petty, too dramatic. Now I realized it wasn't a party, it was a press conference. And I had just found the headline. Most women would have screamed. Most women would have printed that loan application, driven to his mother's house, and set the paper on fire on her front lawn. I didn't scream. I sat in the blue glow of my monitor, and I did what I do best. I drafted a blueprint. In construction, when you find a critical failure in the existing structure, you don't just patch it, you condemn it. Then you build something better on top of the ruins. I picked up my phone. I didn't call a therapist. I didn't call a divorce lawyer. We weren't married, thank God. I called a forensic accountant. I need a full audit, I told him. I have reason to believe my identity was used to secure fraudulent loans. I need a paper trail so deep it hits bedrock. I'm on it, he said. Do you want to file a police report immediately? Not yet, I said, my voice ice cold. I have an event to host first. Next, I called Lauren. She's one of the top real estate agents in San Diego. A shark in a Chanel suit who had always liked me more than she liked Zachary. She had been trying to get me to design the landscapes for her luxury listings for years, but Zachary had always shut it down, saying I was too busy supporting his career. Lauren, it's Sophia. Are you free on the 16th? For the wedding? Honey, I already sent the gift. Return it. The wedding is cancelled, but the party is still on. Only now, it's the official launch gala for Sophia Designs. There was a pause, and then a low, appreciative whistle. Tell me everything. I have the venue, I have the catering, and thanks to a certain non-refundable deposit, I have the budget. I'm turning the reception into a showcase. I'm displaying the sustainable urban park models I've been working on in my spare time. I need you to invite every developer, investor, and city planner in your contact list. Sophia, Lauren said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Zachary has been trying to get a meeting with half those people for years to pitch his vaporware tech startup. I know, I said. Invite them anyway. For the next 3 weeks, I didn't sleep. I worked. I went to the venue and tore down the vision of the blushing bride. I ordered the staff to strip the white tulle and the pastel ribbons. Bring me greenery, I directed. I want living walls. I want architectural lighting. I want this place to look like the future of San Diego, not a Pinterest board from 2014. I printed my designs on massive, high-gloss boards. The park project Zachary had called a cute hobby was actually a fully realized, 3-stage development plan for revitalizing the downtown waterfront. It was brilliant. It was profitable. And for the first time, I wasn't hiding it in the guest room. I was putting it center stage. Then, I sent the invitations. I sent them to Zachary's friends. I sent them to his investors. I sent them to the people he was desperate to impress. The people whose validation he craved like oxygen. The invite didn't mention a breakup. It didn't mention a wedding. It was sleek, professional, and composed on heavy cardstock. Sophia Designs. The unveiling. I was building a stage. And I knew exactly who would be arrogant enough to walk onto it. The night of the gala, the La Jolla Cove Club, didn't look like a wedding venue. It looked like an architectural dreamscape. Living walls of ferns and succulents climbed the pillars. Architectural lighting cut through the space in sharp, geometric angles, highlighting the massive display boards featuring my designs. The air smelled of eucalyptus and sea salt, not stale roses. The room was full. Lauren had delivered. City council members were sipping champagne next to property developers. Investors were pointing at my renderings, nodding in that slow, deliberate way that means they're calculating ROI. I wore a tailored emerald jumpsuit that made me feel like a CEO, not a bride. I moved through the room, shaking hands, explaining drainage systems and green canopies. I wasn't Sophia the fiancé. I was Sophia the architect. Then, the doors swung open. Zachary stood there. He was wearing his wedding tuxedo. It was a bizarre, jarring sight, a man dressed for an altar crashing a business launch. He looked disheveled, his tie crooked, his eyes scanning the room with frantic energy. He had clearly been drinking. Behind him, I saw Barbara peering in, looking like she had just smelled something rotten. The room went quiet. The murmurs died down. All eyes turned to the man in the tuxedo, standing in the doorway of a professional gala. "Sophia!" he shouted, his voice slurring slightly. "What the hell is this?" He marched into the room, past the investors, past the city council members. He pointed a shaking finger at the open bar. "You're spending my money," he yelled. "This is my deposit, this is my party." He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed it in one gulp, slamming the glass back onto the tray. "I paid for this! You're all drinking on my dime!" The crowd watched, stunned. It was the meltdown he had predicted for me, happening in real time, but in reverse. He was the one crumbling. He was the one causing a scene. I didn't flinch. I didn't retreat. I stepped forward into the center of the room, radiant and calm. "Hello, Zachary," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "I'm glad you could make it. I have something for you." I signaled to an assistant, who handed me a sleek, black gift bag. Zachary stared at it, confusion warring with his anger. For a split second, I saw a flash of hope in his eyes, the delusional hope of a narcissist who thinks he can still win. Maybe he thought it was a peace offering. Maybe he thought it was the ring. He snatched the bag from my hand. "What is this?" he sneered. "Open it," I said. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of stapled documents. "It's a fraud report," I announced, my voice steady and cool, carrying to every corner of the room. "Regarding the $42,000 loan you took out in my name last month." A gasp rippled through the room. Barbara, standing by the door, went pale. "And underneath that," I continued, "is the receipt from the venue. The $15,000 deposit you put on your credit card? Since the contract was in my name, I legally converted it to store credit." I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough so it felt intimate, lethal. "I didn't lose a fiancé, Zachary. I liquidated a liability." Zachary looked at the papers in his hand. He looked at the investors, staring at him with open disgust. He looked at his mother, who was already backing away, trying to distance herself from the wreckage. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The arrogance was gone, the bravado was gone. There was only the hollow realization that he had walked into a trap of his own making. "Security," I said, turning to the guards by the door. Please escort my ex-fiancé out. He's ruining the aesthetic. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely self-inflicted. 2 security guards, discreet but firm, escorted Zachary out of the venue. He didn't fight them. The fight had left him the moment he realized I held the evidence of his fraud in a gift bag. Barbara followed him, her head down, refusing to make eye contact with the social circle she had spent decades trying to impress. Inside, the party didn't stop. It shifted. The tension broke, replaced by a buzz of genuine excitement. The narrow escape theme suddenly made perfect sense to everyone in the room. I wasn't a victim. I was a victor. Lauren found me near the bar, handing me a fresh glass of champagne. That, she said, clinking her glass against mine, was the most elegant demolition I have ever witnessed. It wasn't a demolition, I corrected, smiling. It was a renovation. By the end of the night, I had 4 business cards from major developers interested in my park designs. One of them, a city council member who had watched Zachary's meltdown with a grim expression, shook my hand and said, "We need people who can handle pressure. Call my office on Monday." I signed my first major contract that night, right there on a cocktail napkin. In the weeks that followed, the wreckage of Zachary's life continued to burn. The fraud investigation I initiated led to an audit of his startup, which revealed a house of cards built on debt and deception. He faced charges, fines, and a community service sentence that stripped away his last shred of arrogance. Barbara was quietly ostracized from her garden club and charity boards. In high society, financial scandal is forgivable, but public embarrassment is a capital offense. As for me, I moved into a new office downtown. It was small, quiet, and filled with natural light. I sat at my drafting table, looking out at the city skyline, and I thought about the sunk cost I had walked away from. I thought about the 4 years I spent trying to be someone else, trying to fit into a mold that was too small, too shallow, too fragile. I looked at the framed rendering of the new waterfront park on my wall. It was beautiful. It was real. And it was mine. The escape wasn't narrow because I almost married him. It was narrow because I almost lost myself. Have you ever stayed in a situation just because you'd already invested so much time? Share your narrow escape story in the comments. Let's remind each other that it's never too late to walk away.